You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
We are on the eve of the anniversary of Seattle's CHOP. I'm recording this to you on, am I doing that? June the 7th, June the 8th, official date where all the peaceful protesters went back to the East Precinct, because that's what they're just hammering on that East Precinct. They went back there, nobody there, and abandoned. Just no conflict, no nothing. Party time, right? That's what we're talking about. So what are we doing? We are going to read from National Propaganda Radio from NPR, looking back at Seattle's CHOP 1 year later. Sometimes you got to go to places that you don't normally read the news to kind of get a perspective that other places aren't carrying. And I'm going to interject stuff. If you're new here, my name's Sean Reynolds. Thanks for joining. I own a couple of real estate companies. I talk about news that reasonable people want to hear, and I will interject my own opinions on said CHOP matter because I was there, covered it a little bit. And like a year ago, I went from 4,000 subscribers on the YouTube to like 50,000, and the podcast just kind of went crazy. And here we are, like a year later, going, oh, that was weird. CHOP, formerly known as Chaz. Crazy times, right? I mean, they're just wild. That's what we're going to read about today. All right, let's jump on in since I already did the awkward intro. It's been 1 year since people protesting police violence marched to Seattle's East Police Precinct and found that police had abandoned the area. So much to say even just on that little thing, right? I mean, so much has happened since then. That started a protest zone that garnered national attention. The CHOP, Capitol Hill Occupy Protest, not Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. No. We don't want autonomous in our name because that is labeling that we're not okay with. So we very rapidly had to change it to the CHOP. Where was I? I was at, I think the main intersection of CHOP, and somebody was doing a video and they said Chaz, and one of these grimy protesters, in tie-dye or whatever it was, kind of rambled by. It looks like somebody from downtown Portland. They rambled by and they're like, it's not Chaz anymore, it's CHOP. And the person like literally took them like for full face value and goes, I'm sorry. I need to identify that this is no longer Chaz. This is CHOP. It's like, you guys are just talking about names. After a Minneapolis police officer murdered George Floyd on May 25th, 2020, anti-police brutality demonstrations sprung up around Seattle. People marched from downtown up to the East Police Precinct building on Capitol Hill. The precinct became the epicenter of protests. Angelica Campbell said it was important to keep showing up at the East Precinct day after day. I'm going to have children that are black, Campbell said, and I don't want to come out here and march because they got shot. And yet, 2 black kids did get shot and killed at CHOP within a few-week period, right? So the exact same thing that these people are trying to avoid literally happened within CHOP. And what did people say? This isn't good. Didn't see this one coming. I mean, it was just a brutal time, right? I mean, you don't want to see anybody's kid get killed. And yet you had 2 within a couple of weeks. From May 30th through early June, Campbell and thousands of others pressed up against a wall of heavily armed police outside the precinct. Every moment felt tense. Clashes and arrests often broke out. One night, June 2nd, a protester threw a frozen water bottle over the police line. Seattle police responded with 8 flashbang grenades in under 30 seconds. You've got a mob on your hands. When people start lobbing things like, what drives me crazy is when they say, it's just a water bottle. How about you take a frozen water bottle to the head? Let's see how that goes. Have somebody toss it 50 feet away. You know the momentum of that water bottle coming in? Yeah, that could kill you. So when they say it's just a water bottle with water in it that's frozen, makes it very hard indeed. The explosions lit up clouds of tear gas hanging in the air. because you had a mob that was going crazy. And flashbangs. Now I'm reading a tweet. Police are pepper spraying and chasing people down on bikes. People were throwing water bottles, frozen, allegedly. Flashbangs and more tear gas continued for the first week of June. On the morning of June 8th, protesters showed up to the precinct prepared for another day of squaring off with police. But on that morning, to everyone's surprise, the police weren't there to meet them. The East Precinct building had been boarded up. The hundreds of police officers in state patrol and riot gear, the armored trucks, the pepper spray, and rubber bullets seemed to have all disappeared. Nobody knew why the police had left or where they had gone. Or we didn't also know who ordered the abandonment of the East Precinct. Now we really need to know that, don't we? I mean, we've got lawsuits going on. We got 3 different lawsuits that are, probably a bunch more than that. But you've got lawsuits by some pretty integral people to this storyline. They're all suing the city of Seattle because somebody said, hey, let's let the peaceful protesters just run rampant in this area. That whole police, department thing, we don't really need police in Capitol Hill. How could this possibly go wrong? Because after all, the mayor guaranteed us this was going to be the summer of love until it wasn't, right? Reasonable people are like, how could this possibly end up in a positive fashion? It's crazy. Activists who've been calling for the abolishment of police saw this as a victory. That Monday, protesters set up their own makeshift barriers to close the roads surrounding the precinct and set up camp around the area. At first, protesters called the area the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, CHAZ. But that changed to the Capitol Hill Organized Protest, or the CHOP. These names funny. Welcome to the CHOP is written in chalk at let's see which intersection this is. I'm looking at a photo. This is the intersection of, I think, Pine and 11th Avenue East, I believe. It's just on the eastern edge of Cal Anderson Park. And you've got just welcome to CHOP in chalk. And graffiti and everything, just garbage and, just graffiti everywhere. And, the city of Seattle, it is 11th and Pine. So the city of Seattle brought in concrete barricades so that the CHOP and CHAZ, protesters could basically barricade themselves in. And then we had to take those out because you had to be able to get police cars in. We realized this when, a couple of shootings happened and they honestly weren't so peaceful. People were covering the intersection of 11th Avenue and Pine Street with street art. Free food stands like the No Cop Co-op, that was a big hit, lined the sidewalks, and a lot more people started showing up to see the new space. I think a lot of people showed up just to see what the dealio was, myself included. And then I started doing some live streams from there. And this was back in the day before live streams were officially a no-go, because the peaceful protesters, they were still hiding under the illusion that they were peaceful and all the violence hadn't really come out. And, I went over there and I basically said, it's kind of like a block party. And then somebody was like, yeah, until you go back at night. So then I went back at night. Yeah, it was a little rougher, but it was still in these early days of let's have the Summer of Love block party. And, Capitol Hill block party is an enormous thing. They bring in some big bands. Some big artists. Capitol Hill block party, it's a thing. And so having this kind of event in Capitol Hill, not that weird. It might be weird in your neighborhood. It would be really weird in my neighborhood because my neighborhood is just filled with a bunch of random people that have all lived there. And they'd go, a block party? Why do we need that? Don't know any artists on this list. Yeah, we don't need this. But in Capitol Hill, anything new and cool and upcoming, that's where you go to see it. That's who's got it. So the Summer of Love started off somewhat peacefully, other than that whole bashing against the East Precinct for a bunch of nights. And then, whomever said, told the police, hey, could you guys just leave for a while and not come back? Literally, that is what happened, right? So all I've seen is kindness. People are giving people water, people making sure people are okay. It's really peaceful, and it's just such a beautiful thing. If anything, I've been very inspired, Young said. This is literally how CHOP started off. And these are some of the stories I read as well. And then I got over there and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty peaceful, because it was like a block party. And then it just went downhill so quick. Just, oh, we got shootings. Oh, we've got rapes going on. We've got violence. We've got assault. We've got theft. Oh, this is devolving rather quickly. By the night of June 8th, hundreds of activists were camping in and around Cal Anderson Park. There was a conversation corner full of old couches for people to discuss the future of the Black Lives Matter movement. And that was literally on the northwest corner of 11th and Pine. A bunch of couches. And if you got there early enough in the morning, you'd see people sleeping on said couches because, you sleep outside. Maybe you've got a blanket, maybe you don't, but it was, it's June, so moderately warm. Someone set up a projector and people sat around right in the middle of the now closed street to watch movies about systemic racism. The martial law band set up a stage and became the Chop House Band, playing almost every night. They had generators in there. I mean, the city was bringing them stuff. They had porta potties. I mean, the city was basically handing them this block party on a silver platter. No police. We don't need police. What could go wrong? So, yeah, I mean, it was just phenomenal that this whole thing just took place, right? For those first few days, the CHOP felt pretty peaceful. Silberio Ellis was one of the thousands who hung out at night, enjoying the absence of police. Hey, there's no cops around. This is great. I mean, what are you doing where you need to enjoy the absence of police? What are you doing? What's your background? What are you doing? I'd rather be eating the pizza, Ellis said with the giant slice of cheese pizza in his hand, watching movies and watching people paint and watching the art. You know what I mean? I'd rather be eating the pizza. I'm all for pizza. Not everyone liked those late night hangouts, however. Joe Pascal and his partner lived right next to the East Precinct. Think they might be on the lawsuit between the residents and the business owners versus the city of Seattle for basically giving up the East Precinct and having them live in a no-law zone? Do you think they might be in there? Yeah, we would definitely like things to go back to normal, Pasquale said, standing outside of his apartment at the time. I remember towards the end of my Chop at Night video, which was, that was a video. I recorded a video. Some of these things were live streamed. Some of them were videos. Took my good friends, Dan Flitch and Bill Sammer, both guys I've known from the mortgage industry forever. And at one point in time, Bill Sammer said, I think we can say, I can't remember exactly what he said, but I'd like to see the police retake things over here. I think it's time for the police to reclaim their area because we'd been walking around and it wasn't bad, but I mean, you just kind of felt uneasy. And the night we were there, I think was the night right before the Horatio Anderson shooting, the first murder that took place within CHOP. And then it just, it went downhill rapidly after that. So they were on the ground floor. These folks that we're talking about were on the ground floor and their door faced the alley to the precinct. At night, they take turns guarding outside as lots of people went down the alley to throw bottles at the precinct. There were also some barrel fires around the camp. Barrel fires. You got to have those. Those are critical. Just a few days before, Pasquale had tear gas inside his living room, and he didn't expect he'd call the police back to his apartment. We've called tonight, Pascal said at the time, saying like, hey, do you guys have any idea when you're going to be back? These are residents living right there. So are you guys coming back anytime soon? Are you guys going to be back like tomorrow? What about tonight? We'd really like to see a little police presence here because the CHOP, it's feeling a little awkward. When are you guys coming back? Can we make you some cookies? Will you guys come back if we have cookies for you? By the second week of the CHOP, divisions among the campers were starting to show. That is about when I started to go there. Many Black Lives Matter activists felt the party vibe distracted from the original message about systemic racism in policing. Christine Gounder said people should go home at night and come back during the day to focus on protesting, not partying. That is exactly when I started to go there. I went there it was a weekend, and I think it was a weekend after CHOP had started. And I remember thinking, these people they're just getting ready for a big party. I mean, you're going to have a party go on here. And it was Saturday night, I believe. And it was warm. It was nice. I was running around in a t-shirt, and you could just sense, when that party vibe is kind of going. And they already had few thousand people there during the day. They had, they had speakers, and you had an Indian thing going on, Native American Indians, and the Cal Anderson ball field had speakers left and right, a lot going on. And then as I was leaving, I was like, this is going to be a party. Probably not a party that I want to be here for. But it was that they were going to get down, and they were going to do some fun and free things with no police to, interrupt whatever it is they're going to do. People are not coming here for education, Gounder said. People are not trying to learn something new today. Free food is what they're coming here for, period. This is not a block party. We're not here for fun, because they're living there, right? People in the CHOP were also worried about how the police might show back up. That's a very valid concern. You've got a police station literally right in front of kind of the main portion of your protest zone. The police, they might come back. And they did on July 1st. They did come back. So all of this happened within a 1 month span. It was literally 4 weeks. And it happened so quick. At night, some of the protesters stood at lookouts in the entrances of the CHOP in case the police arrived. There were armed guards too. It wasn't always clear how the Seattle police were communicating with CHOP organizers, if at all. That's what I always wondered. Is anybody talking here? And that was the main reason that I started covering CHOP, is because somebody said, hey, the armed guards aren't going to let you in. And I'm like, armed guards? Are you serious? Have you seen footage from this? There's no armed guards. And it's not like they've got this encased in, barbed wire topped fences. This isn't a military zone. This is an urban area in an urban neighborhood, Capitol Hill, Seattle. So I went down there just to kind of prove a lot of these nut jobs wrong. And they were wrong. But at times, I think the armed guards were right there. They just didn't have their guns out. They were handy, though. I mean, they had the guns nearby. I saw that later on. It's like, oh, a disturbance popped up, and a guy, grabbed his assault rifle from his tent. I'm assuming that's where he probably had it, because I saw him. I was back at the just to the north of the Cal Anderson playfield where a lot of the big speeches happened. There was kind of a field area, and that field area is where they made the garden, kind of the famous garden with 5 or 6 planted beds, and they were going to all, eat all these vegetables. It was the summer of love, and that's what you do. Apparently you plant crops, because they did that at Woodstock. No, I think they just went skinny dipping in the lake, right? And listened to Jimi Hendrix on a Monday morning just belt out national anthem on his guitar. But no, the peaceful protesters had guns, and everybody kind of knew it, but there was so much misinformation. That's why I went down there. I'm like, real estate's a little slow this summer. Maybe I'll grab my camera and grab my GoPro, and I'll just walk around and film stuff. I can't imagine doing that now, because there's such an anti-sentiment to the press right now by all these guys, because guys and gals, let's not be sexist. I mean, the peaceful protesters have both men and women. There's such an anti-media sentiment because they're always doing stuff that they can get busted for, and they don't want video record of it. So, but back then I was walking around with a GoPro just willy-nilly, and nobody really said much. A few people said stuff, but not like, hey, old white dude who's recording, you should stop now. They never said that. They were like, who are you shooting for? What are you doing? And I'm like, I'm independent. I got my own podcast. And they're like, okay, whatever. And they just kind of let me do my own thing. You know, I just look confused. The GoPro camera here, you know, just give them one of those and they're just like, just another confused white dude. You know, like, just carry on. So one of our real challenges there is trying to determine who is a leader or an influencer, said former chief of Seattle Police, Carmen Best. And that seems to change daily. So like I was literally there, I think 3 days in a row. And the people that were kind of running whatever negotiations that were happening with the city, with a representative from the mayor, that would change daily. That would change in the middle of the day. And I'm like, did that guy who was negotiating all this, did he go to work? He just left. And all these guys would complain about the city showing up so early to do whatever they're going to do. If they're going to take barricades, they show up at 6. And you literally heard the protesters whining about, you guys come so early. We're asleep in bed and we haven't charged up our cell phones. It's like the city was supposed to give them notice that, you know, this, and this is going to happen today. And if you guys are good, you know, we'll treat you to some whatever. It was just crazy. It was like, this is a part of an North American city. And we're literally, these folks over here are negotiating with the city of Seattle to have the barricades removed or not removed or removed or not removed. We've got thousands of dollars worth of workers sitting in big, massive trucks in a big line down the street. And we're negotiating with these jokers over here. That's literally what CHOP was like. It was just, it was craziness. It was during one of those late night parties on June 20th when everything at the CHOP changed. That night, 2 people were shot right on the edge of the protest zone. One teenager was killed. Over the next week, there were 2 more shootings in and just outside of the CHOP. After the 3rd shooting, a lot of campers left. They didn't leave because of the 3rd shooting. They left because it was already really, really violent. And the deals had been cut at that point in time. That's my theory. The deals had been cut. The groups who wanted their money got their money, and the city said, all right, we're going to give you some money. You're going to need to get out. Deals were cut. That's my opinion. I did, a podcast at that point in time, talked to some member who said he was with Antifa, and he was like, hey, here's the storyline we hear. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I, repeated that storyline on a podcast. And the president of Seattle Police Officer Guild called me and we chatted and told them my story. And also a couple of reporters, I ended up running into them, reporters from Fox covering the whole thing. We chatted about it on the streets one of those nights, one of those afternoons. Like, hey, here's the story I know. And somebody had let them know that they should talk to me over whatever information I had. Nothing ever came of the information I had. And my storyline was off, but it was on enough where it garnered a little bit of attention. That's brutal honesty. I'm a real estate guy. I didn't really have any stories. I'm just running around. He said that. He said this. I'm going to report it for you. So yeah, you had that one teenager die. And then 10 days later, you had another teenager and his 14-year-old buddy, a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old basically get shot up and the 16-year-old got killed. And at that point in time, it was CHOP it'd gone to just a war zone. It was just a war zone. There's shootings, and the last shooting that took place, kid and his buddy were driving around the perimeter of CHOP. Just maybe they were shooting. We're not sure. And at the end on kind of the north, well, I guess it's the southeast end of CHOP, they drove their, I think it was a white, Jeep Grand Cherokee, an older model, and they drove it into the barricade and they just got lit up with gunfire and killed. Just the one kid did. But I heard the audio of that and it was just pop, 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 pop. And then literally a day or two later, just after 5 a.m. on July 1st, Mayor Jenny Durkin ordered Cal Anderson Park to be closed and the CHOP cleared. Interestingly, the day before that, maybe 2 days before that, Shama Sawant, our communist/socialist city council leader in Seattle, city council member, she had organized a march on the mayor's home, personal residence, who was also a former district attorney, a former federal prosecutor. And marching on said home, a federal prosecutor, is a no-go. And the mayor just said, yep, game's up. Chop is closed. We're coming in. So Seattle police arrived with park crews early that morning. That was a really interesting morning for me. I'd been up since 4, been watching a bunch of, I had a tip that things were happening, and I was watching a video feed from an intersection, and then later my girlfriend said, hey, Sean, you got to come see this. It's like I was getting ready just to go to work thinking, nothing's going to happen. And I'm up anyway. It's super early. And then all of a sudden she said, look at that. And there was just a ton of police activity in the middle of the intersection. Like, yep, got to go. So I ran over to CHOP. And I did a live stream of the kind of the shutdown of CHOP, helicopters overhead. It was wild. It was truly trippy. I remember being there going, I don't know if this is where I should really be as a middle-aged white real estate dude, but this sure is some fun. I mean, you can't get much more of an adrenaline rush than having the police coming at you from one direction and then the peaceful protesters, letting off flashbangs behind you. That is some excitement right there. If you want to rush, go out and find yourself some of that. But it was a super interesting way to have CHOP shut down. The police just basically came in. I remember watching, I think there were 60 or 70 police officers standing shoulder to shoulder coming across the field of Cal Anderson Park. And they were just clearing things out, methodically marching through, cleaning it out. I was happy to see them. I thought it was their time to take it back. So that was kind of where I was at. So Seattle police arrived with park crews early that morning. They closed the area to the public, hauled away tents and dump trucks, and took down the art surrounding the precinct. All that was left was a large street mural going down Pine Street that read Black Lives Matter. That's the main drag there. And I think some of that is still there. I think they've tried to keep that there. And so, a lot of people went to that and experienced that at different points in time. And everybody kind of walks away with their own impressions of what happened there or didn't happen there. I think initially it was headed in the right direction, but then so quickly after the police station was abandoned, it just went wildly south. And a lot of people with the Black Lives Movement basically say, our movement got jacked. And, other groups came in and basically took our thing. They stole our thunder. And any which way it happened, it was pretty violent there towards the end. And it just, it was a protest that had run its course and the city shut it down. And that was wild. And then they closed the park. I came back in for I shot a video with a police escort and got some video of them cleaning up, these public buildings that were just wildly graffitied up overnight, like that, cleaned up. So crazy. So it's so crazy how you can in 1 minute have thousands of people having their block party, partying at night, bunch of shootings happen, some violence happens. Police get the authorization to come back. Boom, done, overnight, taken back. Just happened just that quick. Now, the police precinct has just continuously been beat on. So they've had a fence up, concrete barricades, real tall, with fence on top of that to keep the riffraff away that keep wanting to beat on the East Precinct. Because nothing says change like beating on a police precinct, the physical structure of it, right? I mean, it's just like, what are you guys doing? This past winter, the same groups piled up a bunch of snow so the cops couldn't get out. I mean, just that's the kind of stuff that's going on there at the East Precinct. So had a lot of that. Didn't really seem to go anywhere. And it just kind of petered out. There's a lot of people saying, well, we got our message out, and it's like, okay. So if I were to describe CHOP, I would say that it was just a convoluted mess that started out as kind of a block party, racially charged block party, wanting change, wanting to address the whole police brutality thing because of George Floyd. And then it just went sideways so quickly. You had the gardens in there. You had the homeless encampment on the north section of the park. You had massive speakers. You had, and by that I mean physical you had speakers. You had Ben and Jerry's came and handed out free ice cream. That was pretty good. That was some good ice cream. I was hungry at that point. You had some food vendors. You had local businesses that were struggling to make, what do we do here? There were rumors of the armed militants basically threatening business owners. I never really saw or heard of anybody directly from that. There was a lot of theft. There was a lot of assault. There was some alleged rapes, but a lot of this stuff is just like you hear stuff. And because of those involved, everybody's got a warrant out for their arrest for a lot of this stuff. Nothing was ever like for certain. It was convoluted. It was just a crazy period and a crazy time. And then literally, boom, done, just chop, gone. And I came back a couple of days later, maybe it was a week later, sometime in July, and shot the cleanup. And it was almost like it had never happened. The garden was left and a few things like that were left. A few murals were left. Some of the graffiti on some of the buildings that was pretty epic was left. But for the most part, kind of like it never happened. It was just weird and, strange. So yeah, that's kind of what I remember a year after the whole CHAZ/Seattle police leaving. And how many podcasts have I done on, whose responsibility was it to say to the police, you guys need to take a little vacay and don't come back for a while? Because that's where the liability is. Who authorized that? Does the city of Seattle have some liability? Because they do, I believe, and there's going to be some payouts on that, I believe. But yeah, just a crazy time. I remember looking at a lot of different live streams that I would never look at normally, going, all right, I'll just check out and see what's going on here, see what's happening over at the CHOP. But yeah, got some interesting footage out of it, learned a lot about stuff that I don't know. I don't know if it's making a difference. Is it helping people? Is there change involved? I don't see it the way that it's going down at these protests. But again, that's just me. I'm a real estate guy. I know real estate. I don't know activism. I don't know protests. I know I've been there. I know they're violent. I know they throw stuff at cops. I'm not okay with that. I know the message that's on their signs. Not okay with that for the most of the part. I know that they graffiti everything up. Not okay with that. There's a lot that I'm not okay with out of this stuff. That's kind of my bottom line. Yeah, that's kind of where it's at. I'm going to probably release maybe one video. I put together just a bunch of clips and I'll try and find that video. I did that a while ago. I didn't know if there's enough interest. I don't know if there's enough interest. People want to see, just a bunch of raw clips from CHOP and just kind of see that time period. We will see. We'll put this podcast out and we'll see, what it gets, see if people care. Do people care a year later? I've had enough of you guys reach out and say, hey, it was about a year ago. Maybe people do care. I don't know. Any which way, I'll keep coming up with content that I hope that you guys find reasonable and interesting, and we'll go from there. So hopefully it's not another CHOP. That was kind of dangerous, and then that whole Portland thing, more dangerous. Nah, like I've told somebody or somebody, pointed out, I'm old and I don't want to die. That's the bottom line here. We're trying to stay alive in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. All right. That's it for me. I will catch up with you guys on another one. Until then, stay safe, stay alive. Better yet. We'll talk to you then. Bye for now. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.